incredibly damaging for India's international image, the ban. Secondly, banning something in this day and age is a fool's errand, because you're only going to give it a greater life, a greater immortality, than as it were letting it die, having a kind of like a live debate on these issues. Finally, actually, all the previous speakers are factually incorrect. The documentary does give a very prominent place to the Supreme Court judgment and the SIT judgment, which exonerates the Prime Minister. Plus, you have votaries of the BJP as well as spokesperson for Prime Minister Modi defending his position. In fact, the final word goes to Swapan Das Gupta, who's demanding a closure on these events. So all of that this is actually propaganda. This is misrepresentation of what actually the film is showing. But I actually think more than any of this kind of hullabaloo, the problem is really what India's image today might be. Its greatest asset is in terms of its soft power, is that it's a multicultural liberal democracy. With the Ukraine war, all those principles have come up very front and center in the geopolitical arena. This just looks very bad, but it also makes Prime Minister Modi more authoritarian, less in control even of his own people, that he needs to do these draconian measures which are actually associated with China.
So you're saying this documentary, banning a documentary or being seen to censor it, makes the Indian government look bad internationally. You want to respond as a former diplomat, Mr. Sajadar, that the last thing you want is to be seen to be a country that resorts to bans and censorship. As I come back to it, if governments have nothing to hide, you know, why do provide free advertising in a way? It's paid advertising almost for the documentary by banning it. That's the worst thing to do. Just allow it to go, let people judge, let people criticize it, rebut what has been said.
Rajdeep, I think what we really need to do is we need to move forward. I think we've really shackled ourselves by discussing this issue for the last 20 years. There has been a closure. We need to get a closure to all of this. You know, there is also, in addition to, you know, the image of the country, the high profile of the country. And I will say that the image of the country has really gone up leaps and bounds over the last few years, you know, whether it is India's economic growth, whether it is G20 presidency, but not going into all of that. You know, there's another reason that has been cited, it has not been quoted on your program, that there was a genuine potential danger of, you know, public order being disturbed, because this being used, because this is again trying to further, you know, in terms of incite.
But there is very little that this documentary, as someone who has covered the Gujarat riots more than any of those, in fact, who are seen in the documentary who are not on the ground, there is very little that is not known. To my mind, barring the fact that the Foreign Office of Britain has endorsed it, all of this was known in the public domain. I have openly said, I believe the 27th February meeting, let me be clear, never gave the police the instructions that were claimed by many people anti-Modi. I have been very clear on that. And so have others in this video. So why fear a BBC documentary when many of us have said this for years?
This is no fear, Rajdeep. I think this is basically, we don't want to sort of, you know, continue to discuss all that. Because if you are trying to pit the BBC documentary against the Supreme Court verdict, I think you are doing grave injustice to your own judiciary, to your own legal system. The other aspect, you know, when you're talking about the independence of the BBC, let's also see after 20 years, you know, one report from the Foreign Office is slyly handed over to the BBC to do this documentary, the so-called documentary. Meaning, how can you say that it is an independent organization?
Okay, so you're saying, again, going by the conspiracy theory, but, you know, all the critics in a way of this documentary, Mr. Farasat, make a point that it's a closed chapter. Once the Supreme Court, based on an SIT report, gave Prime Minister Modi a clean chit, why revive 2002 at all?
No, absolutely. And you see the last point...
Let him respond.
Okay, sure.
See, a court will decide something and there will be legal consequences for that. Fair enough. So the legal consequences have or have not flown. But is there any law, even in India, that once a Supreme Court decides a matter, it ceases to be up for discussion? Every day we have articles in newspapers saying Supreme Court got this wrong, this right, in terms of after the final decision has come. So where is the question that because the Supreme Court has taken a view on a certain aspect of that fact, not even that's on the personal culpability, may have taken a certain view, may not. Actually, it doesn't even go into that detail, but whatever it is, it doesn't cease to be up for discussion. I think that understanding, I don't know where my friends on the panel are getting that understanding from. Even as per our own law, that understanding does not exist. I'm sorry. Therefore, I'm a little surprised. And I think one thing the government can still do, the second part of this documentary is coming tomorrow, 24th. I mean, none of us have seen it. But I think it'll be good that they don't sort of try and, bar that. That will be at least maybe they, as a hush, as a quick response, they try to, do this. I don't think it helps them. They should actually allow the second one to come through.
Shashi Shekhar Vempati, does it help governments? Would a better attitude, I say from the start, be a point-by-point rebuttal? Take the battle into the BBC's court rather than just a blanket ban which only gives more coverage, more publicity to this documentary, increases the curiosity.
See, first of all, I think this issue has been debated over and over for the last 2 decades. Several elections have already judged Mr. Modi's record, be it as Chief Minister of Gujarat or as Prime Minister of India. And finally, of course, the Supreme Court has, opined on it. So at some point, you have to put an end to it because you have to heal the wounds. I mean, you were talking of the scars of Gujarat right at the beginning. I think it was perhaps Sainath or you, I don't recall. So you have to heal. And how will the healing happen if you're going to reopen the wounds and then raise doubt and cast aspersions? I don't buy this argument that, the documentary was, gave a fair coverage to the Supreme Court judgment. Because if you look at the documentary, you have people like Christophe Jaffrelot, calling it a superficial investigation and dismissing the entire exercise. I mean, that is, to me, I mean, it looks like the entire purpose of this documentary was to reopen the wounds and poke holes in the entire exercise and keep the debate going. I think that is what is problematic.